Hey everyone, my name's Binh An. I'm from the Toronto Knifewear store. I've been chef for about 20 years. And today we're gonna learn a little bit of Yakitori. Let's get into it. So here's what we're gonna use today. I got some chicken legs with their backs attached. I have some chicken hearts. I have a little bit of chicken scraps, some chicken skin. I have some panko, some salt, some onions, which I squeezed the moisture out of, pickled plum. I have some Tokyo scallions, and then I have some shiso from my aunt's garden. First things first is we're gonna get down and we're gonna butcher our legs and separate the different parts of the chicken. So yakitori is really great because it kind of expresses all the little bits and pieces of the chicken, like the oyster or the tail or the kneecap, and it just shows the different textures within the chicken, so you can eat them and see how they taste. So today, to butcher the chicken here, I gotta have a hanasuki. I'm just gonna debone my legs here. So the legs that I've gotten from my butcher, they have the back still attached because I just wanted a little bit of the tail still there, and I made sure that my butcher kind of made sure that the oyster was still fully intact here. So for me to debone this leg, what I want to do is I want to first dislocate this ball and socket joint first. So all I have to really do is I kind of gotta locate it. So the ball and socket joint is usually just underneath the oyster. So the oyster is just right here. It's the top little, I would say like tender little nubbin of meat that kind of sits in a cup. And underneath the oyster is the ball and socket joint. So all I really need to do is put just very gentle pressure on that ball and socket joint on the skin side, and I just push it out, push the leg out like this, and then you can see that the socket kind of pulls out of the joint. From here, what I want to do is I can make an incision right beside, this is kind of the hip here. So if I just run my knife parallel to this hip and go down towards the spine here, I can kind of loosen this up. I do want to remove the tail here, so I'm just going to make a kind of a cut here. So these aren't full tails, they're just kind of a half tail, but we'll be able to clean this up later. Then what I want to do is I kind of want to work my knife around the cup of the oyster here. So I like to kind of position the chicken so that the bone's sticking out, my hands are not crossing over, and I just like to make an exploratory cut just straight where I think that kind of cup starts. And I kind of pull the meat like this, okay? So now I have my oyster separated. What I want to do next is I want to there's tendons that are holding the ball and socket joint together. So I just want to make one quick incision here, just slice right through. So now I've gotten right to the bone here. And at this point, I can basically just take the bone off by just placing my knife right onto the ball and socket joint and just pulling, okay, just like that, okay? So I've removed the hip, okay? Next thing I want to do is I want to just take the drum and the leg bone out. For me to do that, what I like to do is I like to make an incision right on where this fat line is. That's usually where the thigh bone is. So I just make a quick incision here. And then pretending that I have x-ray vision, I like to kind of see where that bone is and just make that connection from the knee to the bottom of that leg. So I just take my knife with a point and I just kind of draw a line until I can see the bone here, just like that. Once I see the bone, I can just go on both sides of this kneecap and make kind of cut parallel to the kneecap here, just so that I have a little bit of room. And then I can kind of, with my fingers, stick my fingers underneath the bone so I have a spot for the knife to go through. And I just kind of use my cutting board and angle it like this so it goes through that. Same thing on this side, I want to kind of go underneath the bone, so I just take my fingers, push them underneath, and then stick my knife underneath there, and then I cut it right here, okay? After I got that done, I pretty much have a handle to kind of push the meat down. So I can push the meat down like this, so it's nice and clean. We're gonna try to keep the kneecap on the carcass here. Usually I take it off, but we're actually gonna keep it on so that we can have another skewer there. So you can see the ball and socket here. The kneecap goes about here. Just watch out so that you don't get any of the bone fragments on there. You can clean that up later if you do, and you just work your knife around those tendons. And then you should end up with something like this, okay? Now what I have here is I have my deboned leg with kneecap still on here. I have a little bit of cartilage here I just need to remove. We can use this soft knee cartilage for our chicken meatball. This is good texture, so we can keep that for that. Nothing here is gonna be wasted. We're gonna be using it all. I'm just gonna quickly clean up the rest of my legs here, and then we're gonna start separating the parts. All right, now that we have all our legs deboned, and now it's time to kind of separate the pieces of the chicken here. But first, we need to kind of like remember what part was what, just so that we can keep them organized. Please, if you don't keep them organized, you're gonna have like your skewers all kind of mixed up. So we don't really want to do that. So kind of looking at the leg now that it's deboned, we want to be able to kind of identify each part. So the easiest way to kind of figure out which one is the drumstick is to kind of look at the tendons right here. So you can see the tendons are sticking out. So that tells me this is the leg. So if I was to reconstruct the leg, then I know that basically the drumstick bone would be here. This is the kneecap here. So the thigh would be approximately here. So that tells me that this is the thigh. This little piece right here is the inner thigh. Notice how it is a little bit higher than the rest of the meat here. It sits a little bit higher. So we definitely want to, this is a skewer itself. We're not going to be doing this skewer today just because we don't have enough of it. But we do want to kind of take it off just so that our pieces for the thigh are going to be a little bit nicer. And then in terms of the oyster, that little bit is right here. So it kind of goes into this little piece right here. I'm gonna separate all my little parts here, and then I'm gonna keep them all kind of separate from each other. So first things first, I'm going to take off my oyster. I do want to keep the skin attached. I like how it gives a different bit of texture. So the oyster basically starts about here, and then I kind of like, one of the guys in the shops, he kind of explains it as like, these are our pizza slices, and you'll kind of get a sense of it a little bit as you're cutting. So I kind of cut a little bit of a triangle here, and then that is my oyster. Okay, so I'm gonna put my oyster over here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm gonna cut the kneecap out. So so the thigh goes this way. So I'm gonna go right here. So I keep that piece of kneecap on there. And then I'm gonna do another pizza slice right here for the kneecap. So it's gonna look something like this. So we got a little bit of meat, we have a little bit of fat, and then we have some skin on there, and all the cartilage bits. There's no bone here, as you can see, so there's no little fragments. We definitely don't want that. It's all about soft cartilage here. So this is gonna be a nice little bite. For my leg here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep the skin on this just because I think that it cooks up a little bit nicer. And I'm just gonna trim off these little tendons at the end. All the trim here that you have, you could be using this for your chicken meatball. So don't waste it. Nothing should be wasted here. So this is my leg. Okay, so we're gonna skewer that as well. And then with the thigh here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take off the skin on this one here, and I'm just gonna quickly remove it. It's gonna be attached by this fat here. You can just peel it off with your hands or just use a knife for that little piece. I am gonna remove the inner thigh. So the way that the inner thigh sits, it's kind of like this muscle here. There's like two muscles in there. So it's just kind of this little flap. So I'm just gonna take my knife and just find that natural separation, and it should just come off very, very easily. So this is the inner thigh. We're not using it today, but we're gonna use that in our chicken meatball. Okay, so I'll just put that aside here. And now with the thigh, I'm gonna cut this in 3 pieces. Okay, so I have this kind of flatter kind of section here. It's a little bit smaller, and then I have cut a taller section. So for the flatter section here, I'm just gonna cut it in half here. Okay, and then I'm gonna cut this bigger piece in half here. Okay, so something like this. So I have 3 pieces of thigh here. Okay, and then our skin, I'm just gonna put it over to the side. Okay, and I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna clean up all the thighs here just so that we have enough pieces for our yakitori. So I'm just gonna go at it. I like to clean as I go, just to make sure that, you know, everything on my board is nice, and you know, the proteins aren't sticking together, and like, it's just a nicer, cleaner surface. Organization, mise en place, you know, there's a difference. Cleanliness is next to godliness. So I'm gonna quickly clean up my chicken tails. So the ones right here, they're just the half tails. I think this is enough to make one skewer to kind of show you what it's like. But what you wanna do is you wanna kind of clean up all these little feathers off, okay? So I wanna just kind of pull them out. They are a little bit slippery, so I'm gonna use a handy little tool that I have, fish tweezers. So I got these little fancy fish tweezers, and I'm just gonna go in and I'm just gonna pluck them out like this, okay? Because no one wants to eat any feathers. And then we're gonna take the bones out of these tails. It's a very, very tiny bone. The bone is kind of tucked in the middle, and I'm just gonna kind of work my knife around this, okay? So I like to use when I'm holding the Hanasuki. Normally I tell people, don't put your finger on the spine of the knife because A, you don't need the pressure because the knives are really, really sharp and you don't need that. You know, your finger can lock. So being a chef for 20 years, I used to do this all the time, and now this finger locks, so don't do it unless you have to. So the reason why I'm doing that here is just so that I kind of use the knife as a pencil. That way I have a little bit more control in what I'm doing. So I'm just gonna put it on the spine here, and I'm just gonna run my knife basically beside the bone, making kind of the exploratory cuts. As I say a lot of the times with my students in class, I always tell them your fingers are your eyes. So you can kind of touch the texture of the meat, and then you can kind of feel where bone is, where sinew is, and anything. So as you get kind of good with butchery and like finding out the different textures and understanding them with your hands, you're gonna learn how to basically debone pretty much anything. I have my little piece of tail here, and that will make kind of a nice little bit, and here's the bone. So these are kind of half tails. So have like the double tail, try to keep it together, but like if you can't keep it together, it's still gonna be fine when you eat it. Okay, and then these other guys. So the tail's gonna have a lot of fat, a little bit of meat, and it's gonna have a little bit of cartilage. So it's all about a kind of a textural experience, right? It's definitely one of my favorite skewers. It's nice and juicy from all that fat. It's kind of that little treat. It's the first thing I go for when I have a roast chicken. So the next thing I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna make a chicken meatball skewer. So I have some chicken thigh meat as well as some chicken shoulder meat, a little bit of skin and a little bit of cartilage right here. And basically what I'm gonna do is I don't have a grinder with me, so but not a big issue. We can do this by hand. We're gonna just use our trusty little friend, our cleaver right here. And we're gonna basically chop this guy up, and then just where it's nice and fine, and it gets to this point where the proteins get really, really sticky. This is what I'm trying to get. So we kind of have to work them a little bit. So you kind of want to do this ahead of time, just so that it can rest, so that it can set up, and then your chicken meatball won't fall apart when it hits the grill. So you can do this with a cleaver, or you can do it with your Hanasuki. I'll show you both. So if I got the cleaver, I just basically, go in, and it's not rocket science here. It's literally chopped into the meat. I like to use my cleaver as kind of a spatula and kind of fold it over itself like this, and then keep going, right? And just keep on folding it. Eventually, you're gonna see it get really kind of sticky, and the way that I like to check is I kind of like to smear it on the board. We're nowhere near there right now, but let me kind of get us there. Now, if I wanted to do this with a Hanasuki, I could do that as well. It's not that much here. Basically, what I want to do is I just take the knife itself, and I just kind of put my hand hovering over the meat here like this, so it just kind of goes back and forward. And then I kind of keep unfolding it, just so that I make sure I get all those pieces cut. Seems like a lot of work. It is kind of, but take your time. Make sure the meat doesn't get too warm. We don't want it to get warm here. So you can see how the proteins are kind of sticking on the board, but not together as much. So I want to work it a little bit more. think we're about there because you can kind of see they're kind of like holding together, so they kind of have a like this form together as they kind of move as one. This is kind of where I want it to be. So basically the proteins have been worked enough so they're stretchy and they're gonna stick together. So this is where I want to be here. That's pretty good. And then what I want to do is I want to just mix this together with a little bit of panko to help bind it. So maybe a little teaspoon for this portion. We can provide a recipe on offline for it, but like you just want a little bit of panko, a little bit of salt, and then I just want a little bit of onions, which I've kind of minced up here, and then squeezed out all the water. So when you do it, just put a little bit of salt on it after you've cut it. That's gonna help draw out some moisture. Then put it in a little kitchen towel and just squeeze it out like you were gonna do latkes. Okay, and then after that, I just like to give it a mix together. You can do this on your board. It will just take a quick second to come together. And then we want to kind of refrigerate it for about half an hour here, just so it sets up and it's easy to kind of form together into a ball. So next thing we want to do is we want to just blanch our skin that we kind of had from before. We're doing this step just to make it a little bit easier to actually handle and skewer. So you don't need to blanch it for very long. It's only like maybe 30 seconds tops. And this is going to kind of render a little bit of some of the fat, not all of it. So it will make it a lot easier to use on the grill so it doesn't smoke up on you and flare up. So this step can really kind of help. Sometimes you can start the skewer kind of on the colder side of your grill too, if you want. So this is about done to me. I'm just gonna quickly grab these guys out, let them cool while I'm working on my other skewers. Okay, so the first one that I want to kind of tackle here is we're gonna do some of the oyster skewers. So I have 4 pieces of the oyster for the skewer. I like to kind of arrange my skewers on the board just to see what I have, right? So, you know, kind of take a little bit of inventory. I like to arrange my skewers here so that I get the bigger piece of meat on the bottom here. So I kind of like see how it's gonna look before I kind of go in. So what I like to do is the skin is really hard to kind of penetrate. So what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna put my skewer into the skin at the bottom, not the meat, okay? Just so I have it through, okay? Like that, okay? Once I have it through, then I can kind of wrap my skewer around like this and kind of form that shape. And I'm kind of pressing the pressure into the board like at a 45-degree angle, and then once it's in, I kind of push it upwards like this through the other side, okay? So like that, okay? And then same thing on the other ones. I'm just gonna go in and then push under and then push up, okay? Watch your fingers, and then I'm just gonna shape the rest of my skewer here. So you can kind of manicure your skewer a little bit, like so. Okay, and that's my oyster skewer. Beautiful. Next, we're gonna do the kneecap skewers. So again, I'm going to lay out my inventory of what I got. Okay, so silly me, I misplaced one of the pieces. Shouldn't do that. So this is again a good reason why to keep your mise en place organized. So I'm missing 1 kneecap, but that's okay. 3 instead of 4 is still going to be very tasty. Again, I'm going to arrange my so I'm going to just arrange my skewer here. Okay, so I have my kneecap skewer here, nice and beautiful with a little bit of meat, a little bit of cartilage. The Achilles. So I'm gonna so this is kind of a big piece of meat here. I'm just gonna put in 2 skewers on this one, just so that I have a little bit easier time when I'm maintaining it on the grill. So I kind of like to go through the fat bit here. We're gonna try not to kind of puncture or have the skewer exposed. So it's kind of like sewing. So I kind of put it in the bottom here, and I kind of like adjust going up and down with my palm over top. And I kind of feel with my hand where that skewer is. So if I do it correctly, which I did, I gotta go back. So I have the little bit of skewer popping out there. So I'm just gonna correct that. Okay, so I just pull the skewer back a little bit and then just redo that little section like that. Okay, So the skewer's not going through on the top, the skewer's not going through in the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically cross these skewers here just so I have a little bit flatter, so it kind of pushes this out and the skin will get nice and crispy. So I'm just going to put this in at the bottom here. Again, I'm going to try not to go through the meat, just so the skewer itself is a little protected. So I have the skewers through here, and then the skin on the top. So this is going to turn out nice and tasty. I'm going to do a very traditional one, so nagima. So nagima is usually the Tokyo onion with the thigh. So I have my 3 pieces of thigh. I'm going to do the ones with the skin on for this one. And then I have a little bit of the Tokyo onion. I'm just going to trim the end of my onion here. And then I like to make the onion pieces a little bit bigger, and I'm going to trim at the very end once I know what I have. Okay, so I just need maybe 2 of these just to go in between and kind of sit nicely. And this is going to add a nice little bit of flavor to the skewer when I grill it. So I'm going to try to put the bigger piece on the bottom here. So something like this. So I'm going to go through the fat part of the skin here. Okay, so I'll add my skewer through in the bottom. Then I'm going to try to push it through the meat at the bottom here. And then I'm going to go through the Tokyo onion. Like that. And then through the meat again. So kind of roll them a little bit and then kind of press in and then out. You want the skewer to kind of stick out the top, but not too much because that side will burn. So I'm just going to press the meat down a little bit further. And then from here, what I like to do is I like to give it a little bit of a haircut just so that it's a little bit more even, so it cooks a little bit more even as well and looks nicer. So I trim all these little bits, and this can go again to your chicken meatball if you want, but that is your nagima. Next, we're gonna do the ume shiso skewer. So we have some beautiful perilla leaf. You could also use shiso. They're pretty much the same thing, essentially. Slightly minty. I'm gonna basically use 3 pieces of this. I'm gonna just cut in between the stem here. And cut that one off. So we also have some pickled plum, which what I've done is I've just taken the pits out and just minced it up here. Sometimes you can find the paste as well, like if you go to your Asian grocery store. We're in Toronto here, so I just went to Pat. Pat usually has everything. It's a Korean grocery store. I just take my 3 pieces of thigh and I'm just gonna marinate it in some of this pickled plum, just to give it a nice little sweetness and acidity to kind of pair with the shiso here, okay? I flip my shiso so that the outside is gonna be on the outside of the skewer. And then I select my biggest piece, then kind of work up from here, okay? And then I just give it a nice little roll. Like that. I think that makes a nice little skewer. Okay, we're just gonna line up our shiso a little bit more. And then we're gonna just point the skewer right into the bottom of the chicken roll, like here, like go in, down, kind of towards the cutting board. And then I'm gonna push upwards, okay? Like this. Sometimes the shiso will rip a little bit. That's okay, it's still gonna stick on there. That's what we want. Okay, so I have a little bit of tear there, that's okay. And just like the other thigh skewer, we're gonna trim this up just so that it's a little bit more even. Okay, so I'm just gonna trim the ends here. There is my ume shiso skewer. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do the tail. Okay, so I have my half bits of tail here, and then what I'm going to do is this is going to be a little bit of a tiny skewer, so I'm just going to go in through the fat here. I'm just going to skewer them through the side of it like this. This is my chicken tail skewer. We have some lovely hearts here. I'm just going to clean these guys up and then we'll skewer them. I'm gonna do like maybe 4 pieces of these hearts per skewer. But what I wanna do is I wanna just take off the top bench, just chop off the little tops here. And then what I'm gonna do, it's totally unnecessary. You can cook your hearts like this. I like to kind of give it a nice kind of butterfly, so I just make a cut in an incision on the side here like this, just to expose. And this way I can kind of see if there's any kind of clotted blood in the hearts. You can also, if you want, and you're not a really big fan of the minerality of the hearts, you can soak them in a little bit of milk. Milk always kind of helps kind of take that gaminess flavor and that minerality out a little bit more. You can do that for like chicken livers, chicken hearts, anything like that. These ones are pretty easy, so I just want to make sure, again, I don't expose any of the skewer. So just work your skewer into it, kind of like the thigh, like this. This is the heart skewer. With the skin, I have it nice and blanched here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna just separate some of this excess fat. Now, when the really, really awesome yakitori chefs do this, they kind of separate the different types of skin. So like there's back skin, there's breast skin. The different parts are gonna have different flavors and different textures. So like the breast skin's gonna be a lot crispier. Some of the back skin's gonna be a little bit fattier. It depends on what you like, but skin's tasty. So I'm gonna cut this in like little strips here. Something like this. And we're gonna just kind of fold it onto the skewer like a kind of an accordion effect. I'm gonna just trim the extra sides here where it's a little too fatty for that, for this skewer at least. So now that it's nice and blanched, it's gonna be very, very easy to skewer. You can do small piece or big piece, it doesn't really matter. I like to kind of keep the outside skin up, but basically I just kind of work kind of like sewing. So I'm just gonna fold the little pieces of the skewer over like this as I'm kind of working it through like this. We're gonna trim it at the end here just so that everything's a little bit more uniform. You're just kind of weaving the skewer into the skin. Yes, we have our skin kind of crumpled up and we have a little bit of gaps in there. So, and then we just kind of trim up the sides so it's a little bit nice. Here is my skin skewer. Okay, so the final one, I'm just gonna grab it from our fridge here, is the chicken meatball. It should be nice and set up. Okay, so that's good, it's nice and cold. So I want about 50 grams for it, so this is a little bit too much. So I think something like this should be okay. And it's pretty easy. Basically, you got a little bit of meatball, roll into a little ball, stick the skewer in here. And then if you have a little bit of water, sometimes that's kind of good to help it not stick to your hand. So if you have a little bit of water, so I just kind of have it on my hands and I can kind of form it. So I'm basically doing the Bart Simpson one-handed clap. And I'm just kind of working my hand and it's just gonna give me this kind of football-like shape. Something like this. And there you go. That's your yakitori. So I'm just gonna lay them on the cutting board here so you guys can see what I've made today. Now I have all my skewers that I've made. I have my Achilles skewer here. I have my chicken meatball here, my skin, my chicken tail, my chicken heart, my ume shiso, my kneecap, my oyster, and then my nagima skewer. Okay. And if you're interested, we do have a yakitori class in Toronto in our store. It's the second part of our chicken butchery class. So join up if you're interested in learning. See ya.